A very good evening and welcome to another edition of Newsline Prime, coming to you live and direct from our News First studios here in Colombo. Of course, your usual host Faraj Shaukat Ali is out for the day. I'm Charlene Benedict and I will be sitting in for him today. We're in quite a decisive period here in the political landscape of Sri Lanka. Of course, yesterday we saw Deputy Leader of the United National Party, Minister Sajith Premadasa, receiving a warm reception by the people in his string of rallies that have been organized in support of him by UNP parliamentarians, local government representatives, provincial councillors. Speaking about the politics and the politicians in our country, of course, it must be noted that all these politicians who we have right now are all homegrown. They follow through the system that has been set up in Sri Lanka as far as the education system goes, the social structure goes. They are processed through the system, and it is then that they come to the helm of governing the people of this country. And because of this, education plays a very important role when it comes to people selecting good leaders and also for a country to inculcate good qualities of leadership inside a person. And because of that, we have got on our show this evening Dr. Chandra Ambuldeniya. He is the inaugural Vice Chancellor of the Uva Vellasa University. A very good evening, Doctor, and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Doctor, now you have been with students from quite a long time. Of course, you moved from the private sector to the public sector. You were a CEO in the private sector, then you moved into the public sector and joined the public service as a Vice Chancellor. Not a common thing for a person to do at a very latter stage of their life. But anyways, you did it and you are here now. So you were an expert on the subject of students and how education should be structured here in Sri Lanka. Just to start off our conversation, a very basic question. You might even regard it as a rhetorical question, but is the education system in Sri Lanka, the current education system in Sri Lanka, really outdated, or can we survive with this education system for a couple of more years or a couple of more decades, for argument's sake?
Your second question is really appropriate. I must tell you that we cannot survive with what we are doing right now. So we really need to change, and how we change that education system is actually entirely crucial to the development of our country. I can tell you very clearly that the education system from several perspectives is not really connected with what we really should be doing for the country for the future. What we take in today as intake into a university is what we are going to produce in 4 to 5 years time from the universities. And if anyone understand what is a knowledge economy and what is a skillful base of human capital that we have in the country, I don't know if we are really contributing to that base that we really need in the country for the future. Particularly because there is a monopoly on the universities from the government.
Right.
There are no private universities in our country. They are only institutions, and there are few who have been recognized by the UGC and the ministry, but they are not universities. They are institutions, which is a very sad situation, right? And the monopoly enjoyed by the government universities, of course, if they are really helping the country with what we need in 5 years' time to come, I think we should support them. But with the experience that I have seen, I'm afraid I cannot endorse a statement to say that that we are supporting. So we really need to change.
You said that the government or the university structure, the education system must look 5 years ahead. But are we even providing the adequate labor, the demanded skilled labor that is required by a company or an institution that recruits these people who come out of universities as graduates right now? Leave aside the 5 years argument.
Yeah, actually, what we get from the universities now the people who are really meeting the challenges that are faced in the private sector, they get into entry-level positions in the private sector.
Right.
But I must tell you, sometimes the companies go overboard, taking students into training positions. Why? Because I don't think anyone is really ready to take up a job at a middle level or little below middle level and run with it as they pass out from a university, because they only know the book and the theory and whatever they have done in a laboratory, right? And if somebody is going to be doing some chemical testing in laboratory, it's a different matter, because they do that in the universities. But that chemical test that you do in the laboratory becomes some part of a production process in a factory, right? It's just a small bit of that, but the entire factory, the person who takes charge of the process in the factory is either a process control engineer or is a chemist in the laboratory who has to look at a whole lot of things. Now they cannot really take the whole full thing and run. So you need to really look at the training opportunity as a golden opportunity that a student gets from when they pass out. But what happens in a training opportunity is very sad, because I think most of them want high salaries, they want to get on to a good title, and moreover they'll be thinking, you know, from the centuries old concept of, you know, pension and you know, social security benefits at the end of the job, which is going to come after about 35-40 years, not 35 years, actually 40-45 years. But you see, what they are missing now is what is going to be missed. You know, your income today is much more important than what you're going to have
in 40 years' time.
In 40 years' time. So if you structure your investments today, I think, you know, you are going to make your life very secure in the future. But our people don't have any kind of concept like that. They immediately want to get into a government job with a pension and also be very close to your parents and the family and stay with that comfort. So eventually most of them get into a very unproductive jobs. I'm just coming here from another place where I was delivering a speech on quality and productivity. I must tell you, the concept of quality and productivity is so important for our country's development, and we need a certain built-in mindset from these students, how to integrate their actions into quality and productivity of this country. Now, productivity, what it means that, you know, what you input and your output, if you can keep on, you know, getting a higher outcome from your, you know, whatever that you're putting in. There are so many different ingredients, material that gets in, including your own efforts. So, in our country, you can see that, you know, in some of the government departments, there are so many people packed into one office. The whole process has become very unproductive.
Right.
I can very easily do a mapping of the marginal productivity of all the government officers that are employing so many huge numbers of people. I think those officers cannot produce what they are supposed to be doing because there are too many people. I mean, sometimes people who recruit these people, whether it is from an MP's chit or a minister's chit or from the secretary's own preferences or the heads of department, their preferences, their friends, and, you know, I don't think really that we can go on packing people into government offices.
You were speaking about chits from MPs and, you know, preferences of secretaries, which was actually the next question that I was going to direct to you. We see that people are being recruited, especially now, during the run-up to an election. We see people being recruited in mass numbers to, if it's the Ports Authority, the Colombo port or to different other sectors. There was a recent issue with connected to the recruitment of sports instructors or physical trainers to about 3,000 or close to that amount physical instructors to schools across the country. So who is actually deceiving who here? Is it the politician that's deceiving the employee or the graduate, the general public, or are the people deceiving themselves by taking up positions that they know very well that they cannot be productive in?
You know, getting a job at this moment of time in a government institution through a minister or an MP or a politician is simply bribing that person. You see, I was listening to the Auditor General's speech recently on the annual assessment, I think, you know, which is very valid comment that he made. Last year they discovered 40 huge cases of fraud in the country, you see. Right. Now, you see, if that story is true, I have no reason to disbelieve what an Auditor General says. Right? I mean, and when they do audits of accounts of a particular year, that is a cumulative effect of a number of years before, and maybe this year's audit report is the result of what happened about 2 years back, probably. Right. Yeah, you see. So, and the following year, last year's one will come only another year or two later. I mean, there's about 3 years gap before the the document gets into Parliament. You see, and goes before COPE. So, all this is because of poor management, bad management, and lack of skills to do an honest job at the top. So I have a feeling that, you know, most of our people are really inclined on, you know, there is a cake which is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but they all are trying to grab a piece for themselves. Actually. The
bigger piece.
Bigger piece. I mean, bigger. You can't have a bigger piece now. The cake is getting smaller because if you take a bigger piece, public will not have anything at the end. So basically, I think, you know, if anyone is hoping to get into a government job, he is only bribing an MP or a minister.
And fooling themselves in the
process.
Fooling
themselves in the process, because their life will become miserable after that, I'll tell you. Because they will not get their skills, they will not have a career ladder, they will not develop their own skills to do something higher than...
And there will be forever strings attached to the parliamentarian or the MP.
Strings attached to the parliament. I think, you know, they will be just sitting and watching what other people, I mean, they will be always feeling jealous about what others, so a few people who have got in through real competition and getting into a job and doing hard work. I mean, that's pretty bad for our country.
Because we must acknowledge the fact that we have a public workforce that's 1.5 million strong in a country where that generally would require about 600,000 to 700,000 public workers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the people to government workers ratio is
one of the highest.
I think it's, if not the world's highest. You see, it's so bad in our country. You see, I like to tell you this story about Ethiopia.
Okay.
Now, what would everybody think of Ethiopia? Immediately, you get the picture of you know, very, you know, badly run down body and a child starving, undernourished, a mother who doesn't have milk in her breast, and, you know, she's very, you know,
dying children without water,
and all food and all that. Now, this was the image that we had. But today I saw a report from the World Economic Forum which says Ethiopia is developing at a growth rate of about 8.5%.
Right.
I believe I saw it on the internet, and, you know, World Economic Forum. And I believe when it is World Economic Forum, they say about Ethiopia that it is the fastest developing country in the Eastern African region.
Right.
Okay. Now, you see, what my not fear, actually, I'm very happy for them, poor country, you know, people are dying. They had a good prime minister in 2011 who thought that, you know, he must do something with what he can learn from Japan, what is, maintaining quality, productivity, effectiveness, and, 5S, the quality circles and all that sort of thing. He got an expert from Japan to help in their development. And I think that was the transformation of the industries in that country when he became Prime Minister. Of course, he's not the Prime Minister anymore. Now, World Economic Forum is recognizing them for their achievements. I think, my fear is actually Sri Lanka will fall behind them also.
As far as growth rate goes, I believe we are behind them.
Our people are not as bad as Ethiopia. Ethiopia has not produced the high indices from the global competitiveness index or anything like that. But they are on the way to doing that if what WEF is telling is true. So basically,
because the same situation was seen in the past. Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew said he wants to make Singapore like Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
But today, at the rate that we are going, we would at least take about another 70 to 80 years to reach the current state of development that Singapore has achieved.
But it's possible. I mean, I like to actually show people how we can make quantum transformations in our country. You see, because this is all embedded in the idea of value addition to the country, the value addition to our resource base. Now, I mean, what I did as a educationist is actually creating value addition in our learning modules, so that the students get that idea of value addition in their head, practically doing what they should be doing for the country, not only just the theoretical knowledge. So basically, we have such a fantastic resource base. You just get out from your air-conditioned offices and these rooms, and what do you see? A beautiful green land, a beautiful productive land. Those days, and I remember, I didn't like it very much when they said it. You see that they say you throw something, it starts growing there, which is still true today, because that makes lazy people. You see,
exactly.
That, but
then that is meant to show the fertility of our land.
Fertility of our land, exactly right. But really, we need to really have a transformation of thinking, because now the world is moving so fast, rapidly with technological revolutions, technological development. So now, when I said at the outset of this discussion that we have to look 5 years into the future, in fact, I will not be able to predict what is going to be there in our country in 5 years' time, because technology is, we took about 150 years from industrial revolution to come to this day today. There were different stages. The first industrial revolution took about 100 years. And then the communication revolution, all that came, another...
It was faster.
It was faster. It really happened. Then, the present, mobile technologies and all this digital revolution has been happening such a rate that, every week that we get to hear something happening, and companies are
new technology coming.
New technologies, and companies making so much wealth that they are bigger than the governments of like 50 countries' wealth. You see, GDPs you can add together at the bottom end, and say Amazon is much bigger than that, or Microsoft is much bigger than that. Or
Apple.
Google, Apple, all these companies. So basically, even in China, there are lots of companies, and they have developed so much reserves in terms of dollars. So how did they do that? Because they had something that we don't have. They have national policies. China has national policy. Now in Sri Lanka, tell me one national policy, if you can. I don't think. I have tried to, because I've been helping policymakers in so many places, because every time new government comes, every time...
So many governments, you've been working with all sides.
Absolutely. Sometimes when the minister changes within the same government, the new minister also wants a new policy, right? So, I mean, this is not a laughing matter. This is a very serious sickness in our country, that absence of a national policy. Now, a purpose of a national policy would be really that if any minister can come and occupy that seat in the cabinet, but the national policy will be
The same.
the apex, the guiding light to really help work the strategies.
So the manner in which the minister chooses to pursue the national policy may differ, but the policy itself remains a constant.
Exactly. Then, as in terms of national policy is a very broad one, right? Even for education, you need a national policy, right? So that national policy should remain for a long term. Now, if there are any things that really are difficult barriers to surmount when you have a national policy, that's why the legislature is there, you see. You have to bring laws to really circumvent all those problems.
And speaking about development, Doctor, it's important about how much a person earns in this country. And according to the GDP of the country, a person earns an average of 60,000 rupees. But you and I both know that this is not the truth.
Yeah. Actually, there are visible, tangible incomes as well as the take-home pay, whatever you get from the place where you're working. Yes. You know, we have such a huge welfare system in our country. That's part of your deal.
About 2 million people are included in that.
Included in that, you see. And our country is one of the best welfare states in the world. That I must give them credit for that. Because there is very rarely that you hear somebody dying of starvation. It happened, you know, during the I think this year.
In Hambantota.
Hambantota, yes. But that was I think there must have been some very exceptional reason for that to happen. Because this country is based on charity and welfare. You see, however much you see now, so many, I mean, we see so many people begging for money at Colour Light. And everybody know that Colour Light begging is actually a profitable operation by some mudalalis, beggar mudalalis. Now, we don't try to stop that. Let them do, you know, that's also business. Entrepreneurship of these beggars and the mudalal. So we have now begun to accept beggars as part of the entrepreneurial system, and that fellow at the end of the day he will be removing all the muck from his body, makeup and everything. He'll be handing over the children that they have borrowed and, you know, all that, and then be counting their money at the end of the day. And sometimes, you know, our police have reported that, you know, people have been begging in the train while having 2-3 houses.
Yes, there was a report that came in recently.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and the fact that you see the same beggar around the same place, and, you know, you can see, and there is no threat to him, there is no competition for him, it's all well organized, right? But I think, you know, we need better welfare systems than that. Now, that's of course not a burden on the government. They don't want to be taken, they don't want to be getting into the government payroll somewhere. But, you know, the sad thing is, now these are the people who don't have the brains. They are not educated. But the point is, the educated people want to be in the government payroll and be entitled to a pension at the end of the, and the pension, they feel, I think this is very, very primitive thinking of, you know, even the Maslowian hierarchy of security, or, you know, it doesn't really have anything to explain this kind of thing, you see. I think this is very poor training. One of the things our universities don't do is actually putting the mindset of students right to take a risk and then become entrepreneurial or become intrapreneurial in a company where they are working and contribute to creating wealth in the country. Now, there was a time when this country had, you know, leftist parties as, you know, stakeholders in the government.
Yes.
In the 60s and not in the 60s, I think in the 70s. Now, we saw how they really, in fact, I lost my first private sector job in 1974 when I was working for the plantation company. I was a, I was a management trainee, became a executive. They called me an executive in the plantation office there. So we had something like 50,000 acres in the country.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I used to run around to the estates, but suddenly the land reforms came and they took over all the estates.
Right.
And I had nothing to do. So, I mean, they said goodbye. And I was the youngest guy there. So I left.
First one out.
First one out. I left. I mean, it didn't bother me really. And I looked for another job and, you know, like that. And I got a good job after that, you know, in one of the top public departments. But in 77, when the free market economy came, for whatever it was market orientation. So what happened to me was I left the government job
to join the private sector.
A semi-government private sector job.
Right.
You see, okay, semi-government, which gave me a lot of opportunities to do, and it was very meaningfully done at that time by, you know, top-level private sector people joining those. You know, one of the people whom I worked under was Mr. Ranjan Vijayaratne, right? And I had a super, you know, university guy. Of course, he came with many years of learning, and he was my director marketing. I mean, he motivated me, inspired me, he taught me, and, you know, so I was getting a lot of inspiration to work in the government sector, but with a purpose. We knew what we were doing. Right, I can tell you some of the things we did, but not useful here. But I can tell you very clearly that we don't have a transformation of mindset in the universities to produce that kind of people who can really afford to take a risk and move into a place where you can be contributing to the national development, creating wealth in the country. So the process of creating wealth can be with the private sector or with the government sector. But what is happening in the government sector is not creating wealth, but eating what has been created by the private sector. I always ask a government servant, now they have a tendency, who are, you know, sometimes the young recruits, to think that, you know, government has to pay them higher salaries, and also they have to be, you know,
get more
given
perks.
all the perks, and, you know, all that must be there. Of course, not doing a full day's honest work. Now, I ask them, do you know how you get paid? The government treasury budget, and, you know, so we get. The point is, if somebody doesn't make profit somewhere to pay a tax to the government,
They don't get paid.
they will not get paid, right? The day the companies die, there is no government service in this country. Then, like in those days in communist Russia or the China, the good old days, they will have to be work under the threat of a gun. You see, fear motivates for them. Still there are parties in our country who are trying to create this fear and get people to work, right? And now what Jayajawardene did in 1977 was making profit the motive. Actually, motivation through profit has become really, what should I say?
Catalyst.
Is a catalyst. That profit motivation has become later, now for example, Amazon and Microsoft and all these companies came together, about 20 companies, and decided. I think they contribute about a huge portion of the world economic
billions.
Billions. Now, they came together to say, more than the bottom line of our companies, we should be concerned about the stakeholders. That means the society. How do we really contribute to society? So as a result, things are going to change with these big companies in the world, because they are taking over the world. They own the information in the country. They know everything about in the world. I mean, not only about the two people here sitting, but the they know everything about us.
Exactly.
As well as
They probably know better about us than we know ourselves.
we know ourselves.
Things that we've forgotten,
Yeah.
they know.
They know. So basically, in 5 years' time, the things to come, they know better than any one of us. We can't even imagine.
Doctor, we're in the final few minutes of our show. So you quite spoke a lot about how the mindset of university students, or students that come out into the workforce, or people in general that come out into the workforce, despite being selected into a government university or not, should have for our country, of course, to move forward. But that doesn't seem to be quite inculcated into these students. Do you think that the parents have a role to play here?
Absolutely. That's a very good question, actually. The reason is, actually, in our country, the family feeling is very strong, and people don't become independent until they are married and gone away. Until they are married, they are part of the family that is tied together. So parents must be observing the conduct of their students. For example, I mean, we didn't discuss this issue about why the universities are unable to produce. I mean, that's another subject that needs a lot of lengthy discussions. But parents can keep an eye on the children who are going to universities to help them stay away from the trends that are taking students captive for political ends.
These include protests, ragging.
Absolutely. That is all done with fear. It's, I mean, of course, once you get hit by the police on the streets with the water cannon and baton charge, that's part of the training those students get to bind them together. Because when I got hit on the streets, so you are my brother, you see, after that. Okay, for the rest of your life, we will remember that, have that memory.
That incident.
Those days, when I was in the university in 1971, some of my batchmates were taken into the jungles and trained, given 5 lessons, you see, and in 71, and they were not there in the university when I came back, you see, and we went through a terrifying period. So today, they can't do that very much, but some of them are giving them hardship training. But the point is, these students actually are being psychologically bonded to each other through these hardship lessons. And also they are being mind controlled and not allowed to outshine their brothers.
Of course, Doctor, and this would also contribute to the fact that we are not producing the required skill set, people with the required skill set for the workforce that is being demanded by the private sector or the public sector in this country for us to develop and progress into the future. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us on our program today, and thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in. Until next time, take care and God bless. This is goodbye from Newsline.